Hey everyone, today I just wanted to talk about this thing that comes up in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community sometimes. This question of, will the governing body at some point just take the money and run? There's been some recent reporting that the group has tens of billions of dollars in assets, and that's without the millions of dollars that they're receiving every day from their members. So will the governing body, the leadership, ever just take this money and run and live out their life on a beach in the Caymans? I think the answer is no. Probably not. I mean, obviously we can't say for sure, but I feel pretty confident that at the very least, these current guys are not planning on taking the money and running. So I'll explain why. First of all, I think it's important to note that this basically never happens in any cult. Pretty much no cult ends with the leader taking the money and running. L. Ron Hubbard didn't do it. Joseph Smith didn't do it. T and Joe didn't do it. Jim Jones didn't do it. Now, all these guys did have to go on the run as the courts and the press and the public start turning on them and their membership dwindles and they become pariahs. Yeah, they will go on international waters or over the border to somewhere where they can escape for their legal troubles. But we never have an example of a cult leader taking the money and going to the vacuum cleaner repair guy from Breaking Bad and changing their identity and starting over. That just never really happens. Keith Raniere from Nexium comes to mind as a guy who definitely took some money and ran, but he ran with a group of his closest acolytes and only when the press was on to him, and he was running from his legal troubles, And even that's kind of rare, the way things went down with him, with old Keith. This question kind of presupposes that the governing body all understand that this is a huge scam and that none of it's true. I don't really buy that. I talked about this in a really early video of mine, but I think it's safe to say that the governing body know that by the world's standpoint, they are considered a cult. That's why their FAQ article on Are Jehovah's Witnesses a Cult is strategically worded to get around the real question. It's why they have this website Bitter Winter, started by Massimo Intravine, a cult think tank entrepreneur. I don't know what his real title is, but this guy works with Scientologists and the Moonies and the Mormons. And yeah, he's just kind of a PR spin guy for cults. He uses his academic credentials to make academic arguments in the witnesses' favor. And some people think that this means that the leadership definitely know that their religion isn't true. I don't buy that. I think it's more likely that they totally understand that they are considered to be a cult, but that they still think that they're right. One of the reasons why I feel this way is a really revealing clip. I think one of the most revealing things that a governing body member has ever said on record. It's from Jeffrey Jackson in the Australian Royal Commission.
And the definitive interpretation of the Bible from time to time is the governing body. Is that right?
Ultimately, as guardians of our doctrine and beliefs, yes.
The governing body constantly define themselves as the faithful and discreet slave, as Christ's appointed representatives. They are taking the lead for the organization, but their website, of course, says that there are no human leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses. Their only leader is Jesus. But that's not what Jeffrey Jackson says their role is in the Australian Royal Commission.
Do you, as members of the governing body, regard yourselves as being appointed by Jehovah God or under the capacity or authority of Jehovah God?
What we view ourselves as fellow workers with our brothers and sisters, we have been given a responsibility to guard or to be guardians of doctrine.
Guardians of their doctrine. When I first saw this as a PMO, as a physically in, mentally out person who was in the group but didn't believe it anymore, this was the thing that made me realize, oh, okay, they're never going to change and there's no point in me staying in and pretending just to wait for it to change. As far as I know, the governing body has never described themselves like this in any of their publications. You will not find guardians of the doctrine in writing, and yet Jeffrey Jackson says it like that. He says it like he said it 1,000 times. Now my takeaway from this is that this is how the governing body members see themselves and talk about their roles to each other. They really see themselves as guardians of the doctrine. So they have inherited this thing, right? They work their way up the corporate ladder and they become governing body members. Well, that means that they have inherited this thing. They are now the heads of this organization that they dedicated their life to. I promise this has to do with not taking the money and running. Let's walk through how a person becomes a governing body member real quick. They have to be at Bethel and be an American citizen. They have to be of the anointed and well-liked by the existing members of the governing body. We also know that they have to come through the service department. It's not like in writing anywhere, but many ex-Jehovah's Witnesses have pointed out that all the new governing body member hires go through the service department. And the service department is the department that deals with child sexual abuse cases within the group. So these are people that know the kind of shady, deceptive tricks that the organization uses in order to manipulate the courts and throw the world off their scent. So people who are appointed to the governing body know a lot of the dirty secrets, but are okay with that. There were just 2 new guys announced, and yeah, they seem like more boring corporate yes men. They appear to be more or less identical in every way to the last 4 guys they've appointed to the governing body. But I think that's important because these guys really don't have distinct personalities. They don't have super charismatic talks or anything like that. They don't seem to have a distinct take on things the way that Anthony Morris or David Splane does. So the group seems to be kind of self-selecting for yes men who are okay with perpetuating the group at any cost. There's an assumption some people make that just because somebody is saying something that's blatantly contradictory or ridiculous or extreme, that they don't really believe it, because nobody could possibly believe that. They must know what they're doing. But no, this is what cognitive dissonance is. It's holding 2 contradictory ideas in your head at the same time. And a really good example of a governing body type figure, somebody who was in a position where they had to lie for the group blatantly to the media to hide abuse, is Mike Rinder from Scientology. This is a bit of a long clip, but it's so apropos. I promise it's worth it.
I want to lay out and describe why it is that Scientologists lie. And Scientologists do lie. In fact, every single Scientologist lies. And the proof of that is if you ask a Scientologist about the OT materials or Xenu, they will lie. They will lie that and claim that it's fiction, or it's not really true, or it's, I did it myself. I did it myself on national television. It was justified in my mind that this was protecting people. And I'm going to explain to you how Scientologists rationalize and justify things way beyond just not talking about the OT levels. Other people would find this kind of objectionable behavior and perhaps be a little embarrassed or, worried that, what are people going to think about me? That just doesn't happen to be the case when it comes to Scientologists lying in order to protect Scientology. That for a Scientologist, a decision about what is good or bad or beneficial or pro-survival decision is always going to be the decision that results in the most benefit for Scientology, because in turn that spreads out and will benefit all the other dynamics. Every Scientologist believes that this is sort of a fundamental thing that they follow in their life. They follow as a Scientologist, and it's called the Code of Honor. And the Code of Honor, I've just excerpted the exact 15 points that are contained in here. But number 12, never fear to hurt another in a just cause. Scientologists believe that it is a very just cause to destroy the enemies of Scientology, or at least shut them up. And so hurting them with lies or telling lies about them isn't something that they feel they should think or feel badly about, because Hubbard says, never fear to hurt another in a just cause. And there is no more just cause than protecting Scientology and seeing that Scientology survives.
Maybe everyone in the comments can sound off if there's like a scripture or a Jehovah's Witness doctrine that comes to mind. But to me, the thing that came to mind when Mike Rinder described this doctrine, that there's no shame in harming somebody if it's for a just cause, is this little aphorism I would hear as a Jehovah's Witness. Jehovah can always bless a decision that brings glory to him. Eventually, this sort of led him to waking up, but it was a lot more than just that. For a long time, it was just part of the fun. These people who condemn the church, well, they deserve to be lied to. They don't deserve to know the truth. Being elevated to a position where you are trusted to lie for the group would give you a bit of a power trip. It's perversely an honor to be able to lie for the group. Because you gotta remember, Scientologists, well, they're lying to suppressive people who are trying to bring us down, man. And Jehovah's Witnesses, they're using theocratic warfare against people who don't deserve to know the truth. So the kinds of guys who become governing body members know all the deep, dark secrets of the group, or at least they know the deceptive parts of the group. They know that they are not necessarily being honest with the press and with the courts and thereby with the flock. Like, they are definitely withholding certain bits of information. And of course, like a lot of high control groups, the higher up in the group you get, the more information you are privy to. But we've seen a lot of these internal manuals. It's not like super cool secret information about the nature of God and thetans and stuff like in Scientology. It's just like more corporate bureaucracy. All of which is to say, people who become governing body members now, they're coming into it with a really strong assertion that the group is the truth, and their role is to protect this organization, even if they have to use theocratic warfare and be a little bit dishonest to people who don't deserve to know the truth. See my theocratic warfare video to learn about what that is. And like, what is the scenario that a governing body member who's dedicated their entire life to the organization, they've had the same kind of childhood that we had as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, did all the things, went through Bethel, did need greater work, did not go to college, did all of this stuff, sacrificed their entire life for the organization, then they get to the top of the corporate ladder, and David Splane pulls them aside and he's like,
just so you know, by the way, we can let you in a little secret. This is all totally fake. None of it's true. But here's the good news. You are now at the top of this scam, and we're going to take the money when Carrot Loesch is 93, and then we're going to, like, what?
What even is that scenario? And when they took that money and ran, they would immediately be wanted criminals. I mean, that would be a pretty big story. So to the extent that any of them have doubts about whether or not it's the truth, I think that they all understand that it's to their best interest to keep that to themselves and to keep this thing going, because there's a lot at risk for a governing body member who questions and steps down. Like, imagine if there was just even a PMO governing body member now. Well, now that person has the hindsight of Ray Franz, and they know the second that they voice concern to one of their fellow governing body members, well, there's going to be an inquisition and they're going to be ousted. The shovel the coal analogy is honestly a pretty good analogy for how I think the higher-ups conceive of the organization.
Now, the illustration is one that I heard several years ago at a Gilead graduation program. How about that? One of your instructors told us about the old steamboats that used coal for fuel, right? So upstairs you had the captain and the crew. Downstairs you have these men busy shoveling coal into the ship's boiler, right? Right. Now imagine one of these workers puts his shovel down and he approaches a coworker and says,
"Hey, did I just detect the ship starting to make a left turn? That does not seem right to me. Seems that at this point of the trip, we should be moving straight forward, not changing direction."
I wonder if the captain really knows what he's doing. You know what? I'm going to go upstairs and have a word with the captain.
Now at this point, the speaker stopped describing the scene. He just leaned forward, close to the microphone, and he simply said, "Shovel the coal."
Well, that's you and me, right? That's you and me.
They are on a ship that is moving. This boat was put in motion by their great-great-grandfathers. They had spent their entire lives shoveling the coal.
Shovel the coal.
And then they get called up to the captain's quarters. And that's great, but this boat's moving and we can't stop it. I believe that they see their role as guardians of the doctrine as like guardians of that boat. They have to keep this thing afloat. Whatever this thing is, the witness thing. This goes to what Mike Rinder was saying about Scientology earlier too. There is no cause more righteous than perpetuating Jehovah's organization and doing his will.
Never fear to hurt another in a just cause, and there is no more just cause than protecting Scientology and seeing that Scientology survives.
That sounds pretty similar to Guardians of the Doctrine to me. It's like those guys in The Last Crusade who dedicate their entire lives to protecting the Grail. I mean, what do they get out of that, being super old and living in a cave? Well, they get to be the guy who protected the Grail, and that's an honor, if you believe that. And honestly, that framing of them being guardians of the doctrine, like protecting the stuff that they inherited, these doctrines, I think that explains a lot of what they do and do not change in the group, and what they are and are not willing to change within the group. I've talked about this before, but most of the big changes are actually flip-flops to previous positions, like the nature of the Great Tribulation and how the anointed are going to be called to heaven. Can people who died in the flood be resurrected. What about Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, they've flip-flopped on this stuff for years. Counting service time? They didn't always do that. Growing beards? Used to be okay. So all of this new light is not really that new, to be honest. I've been reading a lot of old Russell publications. What's weird reading it is like a lot of the individual specifics of like what certain prophecies mean has changed, but which prophecies they're using to mean stuff, that stuff always stays the same. All the prophecies in Daniel and Ezekiel that Charles Taze Russell was using to predict that 1914 would be the end of all things, they still use those exact same scriptures to point to 1914. They just say that 1914 means something else now. That instead of it being the end of all things, it was the beginning of Christ's invisible presence, which was a flip-flop because before then, Russell said that the invisible presence had started in 1870. The 144,000, that's always been around. That's a Russell thing, but it means something different now. Paradise Earth, that's been a thing, but who inherits that Paradise Earth is different now. Things like the King of the North and who the kings are and that big statue. All of that stuff is there from the beginning. The only thing that they're changing is what those prophecies mean. And that goes beyond just doctrinal things like preaching. I think that they could maybe conceivably get rid of door-to-door preaching at some point. It seems like a huge liability, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I don't think they will ever do away with public preaching. Like maybe they'll just go to cart witnessing or informal witnessing, but clearly public preaching is the cornerstone of the belief and always has been. The nature of what the Watchtower is has changed, but there is still a Watchtower magazine. And maybe in the future it'll just be an online magazine like most other magazines now. But I think that they like the idea of the Watchtower being a thing, because they're guardians of all that stuff, of the imagery and the paraphernalia. So that's my take on how the governing body members view themselves. They're just maintaining this thing. They are maintaining this ship, keeping it afloat, and keeping it moving full steam ahead until they die. So sometimes they have to bring new guys. Also, when Jeffrey Jackson is going off on how silly certain older beliefs used to be, can you believe that we used to teach this and believe this?
And really, what are we thinking if we ask that question? Are we imagining Jehovah saying to Jesus, look, this person, they really should die forever. But look at it.
They died now before the Great Tribulation. Oh no, we have to resurrect them. I mean, really?
And what were we thinking?
Whoa.
Well, probably.
What were we thinking?
Maybe we didn't say it, but we were thinking, the number will go down, 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 and there'll be just a couple of old guys in a wheelchair who will get their reward.
This guy, okay. Well, that's probably something that Jeffrey Jackson has had on his mind for a long time. But now that he's in the governing body, and maybe certain other people who were a vote against his interpretation of doctrine are no longer in the picture, now he is able to reshape the organization in his own image. I mean, according to the truth and what the Bible says. Like, this is clearly just a nitpick that Jeffrey Jackson has had for a while. Now that he's in charge, he gets to make the doctrine now. That's what every new iteration of the governing body is doing. They're like, no, that's not right. It used to be right. We need to go back to that other teaching. We had it right before. Maybe they have their own reasoning as to how they're getting at that conclusion, but they only ever seem to suspiciously arrive at the same 2 or 3 conclusions and then kind of cycle through them. So each new governing body member, yeah, they're really ambitious and narcissistic, but I think that that's pretty focused in the organization itself. They see their role as being chosen by God to perfect this organization. They probably have frustrations with the leadership like everybody. If you get a couple drinks in them or get some truth serum in them, they have disagreements. They have things that they want to change. There's this telling video that leaked a while back where I think it was Kenneth Flodine was saying that they had tried to pitch an animated project like years and years before, but that was an entirely different governing body. We just had to wait for a few people to die, and then now we can do cartoons.
Animated series, Caleb and Sophia. It'd be kind of interesting to know the history of that. How did that start?
There's a little bit of a backstory on that one. Probably now it's been maybe 17 years ago. We had done the Noah video with artwork, but it didn't move much. And we were doing the David, and I approached the teaching committee at the time, which was a totally different teaching committee, totally different governing body, and said, wouldn't it be nice to do animated videos for children? And at the time they said no, because they didn't want to take the dignity of the message of God's word and reduce it to cartoons. Well, that's the faithful slave, and so I never said another word. But about maybe 15 years after that, or 13 years after that, I asked to come down to Brooklyn, and one of the first things Brother Morris came up to me and said was that the governing body has approved animated videos for children. I went, whoa, 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 whoa.
That's a lot of what's happening, I think. It's all this, like, Game of Thrones, but to become the top crappy, unpaid leader of a third-rate cult. I say all this because, not for nothing, the governing body members really don't live luxurious lives in the sense that, like, they don't have private jets and have a humongous mansion, except for the one that they do have, and it's called Bethel. Guess what? You don't have to worry about insurance or the fact that you don't have a job and haven't had one for decades. Everybody treats you like a celebrity, and you view yourself as really important. The ego is a powerful thing. When a video of mine gets more views, I feel better than when a video of mine gets less views. Probably it shouldn't be like that. I should just like it more if I like it better, if I think it's a better video, but that's not it, right? It's about the numbers. It makes me feel good. All of us feel that about some things in life, and the governing body is kind of an extreme example of that. People ask, well, if it's not for the money, then what are they getting out of it? And it's power and self-delusion. That self-delusion, that LARPing, live-action role-playing, that's a huge part of it. It's a huge part of what draws people into extremist movements. Most human beings struggle with their identity in one way or another at a certain point in their life. And so it's really convenient to join a group or a movement or a cause or something where your identity is sort of assigned to you. Here's the kind of things that we do and say, and here's how you can be successful. Here's how you can gain power and influence people. And if you believe that stuff hard enough, if you make it real to yourself, then I'm assuming that can be very satisfying. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. So no, I do not think that they will take the money and run, at least not yet. I think that it is likely that as this group continues to be more and more exposed in the media, and there are consequences legally for them as they make less and less money and their membership declines, they will become a more isolated movement, and probably they'll move their world headquarters out of the United States into somewhere where the law is a little bit more lenient. Jehovah's Witnesses are just way bigger than Scientology when they went on that boat, or Jim Jones when he went to wherever he went, or the Mother God people before they went to a different trailer in another place. So yeah, they may be bleeding members, but they can bleed for a long time, and that's lucky for them because they don't accept blood transfusions. Sorry. Well, that's my thoughts on that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I mean, this is speculation. I could be totally wrong. All of their real estate stuff is super sketchy. Like, I totally believe that there is financial shenanigans going on. I tend to think that they just do this because they know that in order to keep the ship moving, they need to burn fuel. And fuel is money, and the ship is... I got lost in my own analogy. Thanks for watching. If you like the channel, like it and leave a comment and subscribe. And there's even ways that you can be a member. Oh man, imagine being in the secret cool club. Thanks to all my patrons and YouTube members who got to see this video early. So have a good day. I don't have a sign off.
Whoa, 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 whoa. But the timing wasn't right back then. And probably the technology wasn't right back then. But now that was approved, and so I was just thrilled. But then he said, whoa. And so I was like, whoa.